Hi everybody and welcome to another episode of the Renewables podcast, and today we are joined by Steve Humphreys, the Technical Commercial Manager from NAPIT. I'm very excited to speak to him about all things renewables. But firstly, before we chat to Steve, we're going to have a chat to Mark, co-host, and see how you are. How are you doing, Mark?
I'm good, thanks, Sam. I'm really looking forward to this one again, where hopefully Steve can fill us with lots of pearls of wisdom and help tell us where we've been going wrong.
Oh, it's very, very
Too much pressure there. No?
Loads of pressure, but no, it'll be good. I am as well, because it's sometimes rare to hear from bodies like NAPIT in this sort of environment, really, isn't it? And have these kind of one-on-one chats. So, yeah, really looking forward to that. But welcome, Steve. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm good, thanks, Sam. Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah.
Love these chairs, by the way. You're probably going to get that all the time, that people love the chairs. But no, really grateful for you asking me on, actually, because renewables world is just fantastic at the moment. So just enjoying the ride. Yeah, it's exciting, challenging, but exciting as well.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect way to sum it up. It is challenging, exciting, and yeah, we see that on the coalface a lot, don't we, Mark? Fitting this kit, and some of the conversations we have here re-emphasise how challenging it is to comply with everything. But we're going to get into some nitty-gritty things. But before we jump into all of that, do you want to give us a bit of a background as to what your role is at NAPIT and kind of a bit about that?
Yeah, so like you say, technical commercial manager at NAPIT. Haven't been there a long time. Only joined in August last year. Previous to that was at an awarding organisation involved in writing renewable qualifications as well as others. Okay. Before that, in education for a long time, and before that, on the tools.
Yeah.
So come through that journey. Like a lot of people that end up in this kind of role have been from on the tools into training, and then sort of step up the ladder. I know that sounds a bit arrogant. It's not meant to be. It's just that sometimes you fall into these roles. But since I've been here as the technical commercial manager, it's just been brilliant, because it's given me the freedom to have conversations with guys like yourselves, other organisations, the IET, NIC, EIC, who are supposed to be our rivals. We've been working well with them, sitting on JPEL committees, RAG, all these kind of things are part of my day-to-day, as well as obviously being in the commercial side on that front-facing person as well, which isn't bad for a ginger, to be on camera. So actually what I've been doing is a lot of the webinars with Frank Bertie, who's our Chief Technical Officer, also doing podcasts. We started our own podcast last year as well, called What's Current, which I know, Sam, you came on and we did a two-parter on that.
Yeah.
So they've been really fun to do. And it's like one of those roles at the minute where you think, wow, this is a really, really exciting and fun job, because you just get to be an electrical and renewables nerd all the time, just speaking to different people. But, it has its challenges. There's obviously deadlines and timelines, and, we're in a show for the next couple of days at Harrogate, just back over West Way.
You can tell you're not from up here.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not that way, somewhere that way. And but that's been good. And writing technical articles has been good and stretched me, which is good for my learning as well, because we all know we don't know everything.
Yeah.
But hopefully the skills that I've already brought over the years sort of, gained those stripes that have stood me in good stead for that role. So writing articles for our members magazine, the Competent Person magazine, also, appearing in Professional Electrician, which is a really nice thing to have in there. Some of those, and also we're involved in writing a new publication now for renewables. Okay. So we're hopefully launching a PV book, like a practical guide, hopefully in June. We're going to take some pre-orders that ready for installer, and then off the back of that later in the year, we'll have a battery storage book, because we want to bring some of the things like the code of practice and the regs and some of these past documents. We want to sort of feed them into a book, but make it more user-friendly, if that makes sense, for the designer installer, because I think some of these things can just cause a little bit of confusion. If I think from my days of install, you had your on-site guide as you go to in the back of your van, but you needed to get your head into these other things as well.
Yeah.
So like I say, it's just an exciting role, that one I'm really privileged to be part of in the industry.
Yeah, I think I got to witness one of your presentations over in Ireland towards the end of last year, and they're really good. They're kind of setting them at an installer level. I think some of the other stuff, it's more like PowerPoint and people talking at you, but yours was really trying to see it from our side of things, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think NAPIT as an organisation seems to do that pretty well, to be fair. You kind of pitching a lot of your content in our best interests, I'd say, with code breakers and your version of the on-site guide? I think
I think the on-site solutions, the code breakers, has been by far our best seller. Because it's a handy thing for contractors to have. I know that's slightly off topic on renewables, but I think, and what the technical people are striving to do at NAPIT is definitely just have that personal edge to them. So always think with your installer head on, how would I do that? So it's all right having loads of documents, but how does that relate to the thing I'm going to put in? Because sometimes those two seem a mile apart. So since I've come on board, we're just trying to join those dots a little bit better as a technical team internally, but also with external partners as well, like I say. And thanks for that feedback. But what I try to do is I do want to offer that at installer level, because at the end of the day, that's my heart is, I'm still a passionate... I tell people I'm a sparky to a certain degree until they want something done.
We'll have you for a little bit longer. You've not been out of it
yeah. But now I say, I'm out of that world.
I think that's similar to why we wanted to start this podcast. It really was, I always describe it as like an airlock. There's like an airlock between people that compile the regulations and best practice guides, and they're kind of all talking to each other in that area. Installers are all moaning about all of that in their area, and I consider myself part of that gang. Got manufacturers making products to their own ideas as to what the market wants, and there kind of isn't anywhere in the middle, and that's why we wanted to create this podcast, to try and do our little bit of input to try and bring people like yourselves in front of installers, in front of customers, in front of manufacturers, and kind of bring everybody together to actually consult on many different topics, so that we can try and get the best of all worlds, really, and just because we all need to be part of making the industry better. It can't, one little corner of or one little airlock can't create a perfect installation environment. It has to be feedback from every little airlock, if you like, to create a really good team to make the industry better. So yeah, it's good to hear that you're kind of trying to pitch at it from an installer's point of view.
Yeah, I think that's what, like I say, I want to bridge that gap, hopefully, and do that in a personable way, in a way that people understand, and not be a faceless organisation as well, because I think, sometimes we get the blame for a lot, not just us, organisations, like the NIC, who we work closely with, like I've said, and IET and ECF, and there's just some fantastic people in those organisations that are striving to do the best because they're passionate about the industry, that's doing it safely, doing it properly. But sometimes when you just see a brand, that's literally then something to fire shots at, and hopefully by doing things like this, people realise, that they are for the good of the industry. We just want to take your money and walk off into the sunset. That's not what we're about. We're a commercial organisation. There's no hiding behind that. We've got different arms to the organisation. So if you consider us just as a CPS, that we're more than that. We offer other schemes: electrical, heating and plumbing, renewables, energy efficiency. So there's lots of schemes within NAPIT. There's the training side, and I know you guys have probably done some training with us at the Mansfield or the Oldham centres. There's the NAPIT Direct, where there's products available. There's obviously the publications. There's the NAPIT Foundation, which is really interesting, and not a lot of people know about that, because there's a guy called Tim Nixon who literally built that from the ground up for students. Right. So what he'll do is he'll go to colleges and he'll speak to the students and the lecturing team, and he offers them, with NAPIT Foundation, they get access to all the webinars, the podcasts, as if they was members, for free. Discounts on books, and we'll take some books with us, obviously, and give them away as freebies. Me and Tim recently linked up one at a college to do. I did a bit of technical code breakers. He did, obviously, about NAPIT Foundation, to just try and engage those younger learners to give something back to the industry. So I think that sometimes that goes a little bit unseen, that work in the background is like they just see us as CPS, you pay your fee, you have an assessment, and we're much more than that as an organisation.
Yeah, I think
sorry, so it's you've said it's the faceless side of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's frustration out as installers, and it's so easy to just say, well, it's NIC or NAPIT or IET or whoever, taken out of context that it's actually people like Steve working really hard, and we're saying is a bit rubbish because of that, and it's not fair. I don't think that's something that should be emphasised. These people are trying really hard, and it's very difficult for us as installers to keep up to date, and for them as well. It's
an easy target, isn't it?
It is.
It's an easy target, and I think it's tricky for for companies like NAPIT and the IT and everyone else to, when there is, again, I'm going back to the analogies, but when everyone is in their own little camps, to, if there was more conversation between all parts of the industry, a really good open conversation, then it maybe makes it harder to blame one area, because you know that they've talked to you extensively about, like this Amendment 3 change and, whatever problems that you find on the past document and all this other stuff. It's like, you can't really go, well, why didn't we hear from you on that and this, if everyone's actually been talking quite openly and regularly about all this stuff. But yeah, no, it's great to kind of hear a bit about what NAPIT are doing and what have you, and a bit like some of the other podcasts that we've done. We are taking questions when we have the great opportunity and the honour to have someone like yourself in it from an industry body like NAPIT. We like to try and get everyone involved that listens to or watches this podcast to ask questions. Because again,
is this my time to leave now?
Right, strap in.
What's your bin number?
There's nothing in that account, mate. Married with 3 kids and 2 dogs.
No, but the reason for that, like I say, is we're trying to bridge that gap and get people to give this a good opportunity, use this as a good opportunity to ask you those questions that people are chatting on site about. Why didn't they tell us about this? Why didn't they tell us about that? Well, let's find out. Let's find out why that is. So yeah, strap in. But before we kind of do that, obviously there'll be quite a lot of people watching this, most probably, or certainly on the installer level, as to what NAPIT is. We'll know that already. But if you could just give us a brief overview of, what is NAPIT, why is it there, why is it important for companies to be, members of industries like of companies like NAPIT, and what should maybe customers take from a company like ourselves that are members of NAPIT? Why is it there?
Well, basically, you've hit the nail on the head. We exist really for our membership and wider industry. We're a membership organisation essentially, and like I just said, people tend to think of us just with that CPS kind of thing, but it was birthed out of sort of the inspection and testing really, and just really snowballed into something else. And then when the dreaded Part P come along, which was the right intention really for the way the industry needed to go and be policed, but never was, which we all was frustrated. I remember my time as an installer thinking, this isn't fit for purpose. Do I go to a building control to get that, or do I sign up and pay my fee? It was meant to facilitate that, and obviously it does. You'll get your notifications done through us and stuff like that. But, for me, in the role I sit in, really, I suppose the biggest thing why I would say is join, especially if you're doing any kind of renewables or domestic installs or full scope industrial commercial, is because the technical aspects of what we can offer. And not everyone tunes into that, let's be honest. There's some very clever installers out there. But like I said earlier, we don't know everything. And the technical resource we can offer is a real plus. Like I say, the webinars, the podcasts, the publications, the articles you can see, just to give you that CPD all along, and that's desperate what we want to do. So I think, again, without repeating myself, I don't want people to think as our organisation of just like you hand over your money, you have your yearly assessment, and you get a tickety boo or you get told off and then you walk away. We're there really to support the members and the wider industry, and we could do that better with the wider industry. I think we can all agree, because we don't want to be a faceless organisation. We want to be a bit more cutting edge if we can, and be leading in those conversations, and we do. The committees we sit on, JPEL 64, RAG committees and stuff like that we're involved in, we have got a voice, and that's our members' voice as well. Although it doesn't feel like it, I think installers like yourselves always like the last to know, or, oh, well, I didn't know about that. We don't want that to be the case, and maybe that getting information out to our members and the wider industry does need to be a bit better. And things like this and social media are a great space to do that. But I think essentially, we're there for our membership, and just to try and improve that at the electrical industry, the renewables industry, and make things safer. I mean, that's it in a nutshell, really. I mean,
there's a thing you mentioned there about the members and you representing them that I think is something we all miss sometimes, and that's the trade association aspect of this, where you have your regional meetings where you can kind of filter up from a small level installer like we are into those, which can then get passed up the chain through NAPIT onto JPL 64 with you representing our views there. So this Amendment 3 that's come out now, if you like, when those discussions are taking place, you kind of got our view to put into that argument.
Yeah, and we do. We take that very seriously. So and something that people don't know is the technical helpline isn't just something someone rings up and phone our technical helpline and say, "Oh, I've got a problem with so and so. Can you help me fix it?" That call and everything on that data is logged, and we track it. And in our monthly our monthly technical meetings, we look at that data of where the spikes are in calls and what the subject is. So, for instance, we still get, believe it or not, earthing and bonding is still probably the highest one we get on daily calls. So, me and Frank have put our heads together, and the webinar in July will be on earthing and bonding to try and get that across. So sometimes it doesn't feel like the members have a voice, but we do actually listen and drill down and say, look, we're concerned about this because you're concerned about it. So how do we get across? And I think that takes time sometimes because the information we have to put out there needs to be correct technically. So we can't go down our opinion of what Steve thinks or what another technical member of the team thinks. It's got to be a joint effort to come up with a document or a podcast or some information that whatever way we put that out there that's right. I mean, we've done one recently on DC isolators, the big subject. Me and Sam, we've spoke about this many times. So if the DC isolator is for a PV system is integral on the inverter, then suddenly there's all this blurb of you don't need them externally. Well, we've said that's not the case. Our stance is NAPIT recommends that they still are fitted even there's one integral, and there's lots of reasons we could go into for that, but ours basically is that device is for safety. And that device, if it's faulty, and it is a high percentage of faults and fires, that those stats don't lie, but that's competence and install errors rather than what the device is intended to be used for. So we thought, why would you take something away that protects something else? And from a basic point of view, if I want to do maintenance on that inverter and I've still got live terminals coming into it, that just doesn't sit right with me personally either. Thinking to my days of changing consumer units, I always like something beforehand so that to isolate those tails coming in.
Yeah, one thing that I've learned about this podcast is rabbit holes.
Sorry.
No, it's a great conversation. I love going down those rabbit holes. But it just shows you how much there is to talk about in renewables, isn't there?
Yeah,
they're just everywhere, and it's fantastic, and that's what needs to be more. Needs to be more of those conversations because it affects massively how you're pricing jobs, how you're installing jobs.
Yeah,
and I've always thought this: everybody wants to go to work and do a good job, but it's about the training you've got, which obviously NAPIT can have a big part in, the time you've got on the job, and the price that you've put into the job. And I feel like it's normally one of those three elements that cause someone to not do a job they can stand back and be proud of, and that's quite a shame because most of them, or all three of them, are addressable. And I've got to say that since I went self-employed, and I didn't really know an awful lot about it when I was employed because it wasn't really my part of the job, but I was definitely a member. I was a member of NAPIT, a fee payer that basically just saw it as, I've been told I've got to be a member, I pay my fee, I get an assessment which proves competency, see you next year. But over the recent years, I've been looking more at, maybe because I'm tired, I'm a Yorkshireman, but how can I get more value out of this? And then as soon as you start digging into that, you see training, you see podcasts, you see technical newsletters, you see all this stuff, and it's like it's this big new world of information that you don't get to see, and it's difficult when you're self-employed and you've got lads working for you or whatever teams working for you to dedicate the time to that sort of thing. So like one thing that we've implemented as a company has been CPD days where we actually, as a team, we pick a topic, and as a team we actually go over some information, and that going forward, some of the great stuff that NAPIT are putting out can form part of those days and actually help take some of that strain off me as the person that was going to write that and actually use some of that information.
It's there. It's all there for you.
It's there. So I think that for people watching this, for installers watching this, is a great thing to look at. So where's the best place to find a lot of that information? Would it be the website or
I mean, for members, people that are already members, it's there. They've got the member portal, and if there's a tab down the left-hand side, it'll have all the webinars going back for whenever, all the CPMs going back for the magazines. The podcasts are on there as well, so they can access that. They're all recorded, so you can watch them over and over again on all weird and wonderful subjects. There's at least 3 technical articles in the magazines we do, like I say, 4 of those a year. Those will then filter into professional electricians, so they're out there in wider industry as well. So there's just loads, but it's quite common, Sam. What you say is you don't see a lot of people access that, but it is there, and we work hard to produce that stuff. I've had I don't want to make it about me or for me, but I've come up this morning obviously because I'm doing Harrogate, but and it's an absolute privilege to come over here. But I want to do stuff like this to show that we work blinking hard for the industry, to put this stuff out there and make sure it's good. We don't, like I say, we don't always get it right. We're only human. We don't know everything, but we strive our best to make sure that the content we put out there is available for everyone. And you think about an organisation like ours, going from small beginnings, we're over like 19,000 members now.
Wow.
I mean, that's just crazy. The growth has just been weird, and I think that's, it's not weird, I can put my finger on it, and I think it is really because we are just being more open and front-facing and just trying to get rid of that image of being just like, we'll take your money and run kind of thing. That's not what we're about. If you phone our helpline for anything technical, the guys there, they're all ex-installers, they know their stuff, it's not some random salesperson trying to sell you something. You're getting through to the right department and hopefully speaking to the right people.
Do you think the renewables side of things has helped that growth? Do you attribute a bit of that?
Massively, yeah. To be honest, Mark, I think we've seen that boom. Like, excuse the pun, we shouldn't really say boom, should you, in electrical and renewables space, but we've seen not today. We've seen that boom, and it has grown, and that's great, but that's putting pressures on us internally as well sometimes, because we've got lots and lots of assessors out there nationwide that are covered by managers that manage those assessors, a mixture of direct staff and subcontractors. That's managed by a head of everyone, so that's a real slick process. And so but you think about it, if you get a renewables glut in one particular area of the country, we need to make sure we've got the resource available and drag that from elsewhere. That assessor that's going out to do that, applicant for maybe adding a scope of renewables, let's say PV, they've got to be skilled themselves. It's no good sending, send so-and-so, he's only a basic spark. So we're making sure that we're facilitating that properly, bringing new staff in, upskilling our existing staff as well, which is really important. So all that's happening behind the scenes to make sure that we're giving the best value for the customers. But it does put pressure on. There's no two ways about it. We can't be all places all the time. And a lot of what we get in industry sometimes is, and I think we've spoke about this before, how long do the assessments take? I've been waiting months and all this. But that process in itself, I mean, that's not my background, to be honest. So, I don't look after that part of it. But what I do know after speaking to the team is that that can be a double-edged sword sometimes, because it might be an internal issue. We might say, we haven't got someone just yet, but inform that potential applicant that we're on it. But actually, sometimes these assessments don't go to plan. So you could turn up and say, oh yeah, I've got my first solar job, I'm doing this, but the back office stuff might not be correct. They might not understand the MCS requirements, if that's part of it. So then they end up with something called what's improvement actions. So, and they're supported. It's not like a slap on the wrist and leave them to their own devices. They will be given improvement actions, but they'll be guided through how to get over those. So if there's think about it, the new driving test, minors and majors, if there's something they're doing completely unsafe, that's a bit more of a difficult conversation. But if it's something where you need to tweak it here and there, make sure you've got the right books in place, some of it is training. They want to enter into this renewables world and they haven't actually got the required qualifications. So that delays everything. So suddenly what should take perhaps 3 to 4 weeks ends up being a drawn out 8-week, 10-week process because you're waiting for that to feed in. But when we do get that evidence, there's a schemes team sat in Mansfield at head office, because I've been there and seen it, they get that evidence and they'll get that cleared off as quickly as possible. But it's not a perfect circle in that world, I think. So I can understand installers' frustrations, I want to start installing it now, but like I say, the process isn't always, it's not always an exact science, I would say.
As someone new to this are relatively new, I can say that is actually how it played out. We're with you guys for MCS, and I went on that kind of journey coming into industry, kind of forced into it by my sons who wanted to go in there, as we've been through before. So I had to go on that learning journey with you guys about you need to do this training, and that takes a period of time getting booked onto the course, not just fitting in with your schedule, but my schedule and my guy's schedule. So it's all that side of things. Then getting the paperwork side of things together. The assessor who came to see us was brilliant, actually, and pointed out a few things that we'd missed in terms of some of the simple stuff, in terms of putting in about the batteries, little indents that you need when you're doing your proposals and stuff that I'd totally not considered. And the notification side of things, we were supported with all that. So it does actually happen. That's something that we've gone through. And I always say to people coming in fresh, you need to kind of allocate a realistic window of 4 to 6 months from a standing start to doing your training. It's like, you've got to be realistic about this, I think. Whereas if it's someone like you, Sam, who's been out of solar game for a bit and then coming back into it, it's maybe faster. There's not one size.
Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, no, we got a question on that because, like I say, we take questions from people that are watching and listening to this when we announced it.
Did I already answer it? Did I?
Well, no, it's good. It's great. So the question was about MCS applications taking a while.
Yeah.
But from what you mentioned there, that it's due to depending on what assessors and people that are in that area for that applicant, and the delays possibly through missing an indent in, like you mentioned, that sort of delaying things to getting your final stamp of approval, or needing to then book on a training course before you can apply to get your stuff.
And the other interesting thing on that, Sam, is that MCS last year had a consultation themselves because they realised that there's some of the scheme requirements and getting on it were quite bulky. And remember, or NAPIT, we operate that scheme on their behalf, so to speak. So we're within their requirements. So they had a consultation, spoke to their current membership, and realised they needed to make some changes. That started to filter in late last year with some stuff they were putting out, but we haven't seen the full fruition of that yet. So you imagine, like, if they're going to change things, that's filtering through to our staff. So they need to wrap their heads around it. And then what we're telling potential applicants then is say, like, oh, you need to do this now. Hopefully it'll be easier in the future. So that process, I think, should speed up as well. Because, MCS are working hard to try and do their bit as well to improve the industry, which, again, is another one where, I don't need to be MCS. And, I'm a big supporter of that because I know that kite mark and that quality mark for customers and installers, to be fair, is so important.
And insurers.
Yeah, exactly.
As these systems get bigger and more powerful and more complicated, with batteries and heat pumps and all this other stuff, it's actually not allowing the industry to be the Wild West and actually having someone that is kind of policing it or doing the best to police it. There's always more improvements and there's always cowboys and there's no matter what industry you're in, but it's trying to have that place where you can report unsafe actions by a contractor or something that you found, but equally, supposedly it's not always perfect, but the customer being able to weed out any contractors or businesses that don't have that NAPIT or MCS stamp of approval, where they know they've been inspected, they know they've done the training, because they wouldn't get that stamp unless that's been checked and clarified. So whilst there's definitely things that aren't perfect at NAPIT, and there's definitely things that aren't perfect at MCS, rather than, and I'm guilty of bashing both of those bodies myself at different times through frustration, but I'd prefer to try and work with those bodies to improve it than just go, we should just scrap it and just because then you do let all of the cowboys.
I think it's one in the industry where I see that quite a lot in general about why do we need these CPS operators, the Part P's a load of rubbish and it's not really worked. But if we went back to where it was, you're quite right, we're just opening the floodgates then. It's better to have something than nothing. And some people will say, well, if you have an assessment once a year, is that really enough? But then we don't want to be in your face as a business all the time. And we'll get to know you over a period of time, whether you're a good installer or not. Yeah. And then they'll be, I don't want to use the term back off, but actually we're having that conversation throughout the year. I think with my quality assurance head on in previous roles, that's how I'd always be with people. And the ones that are a little bit like, this take up a lot of your time, let's say, those are the ones you need to nurse a little bit more. So, for instance, if you think, we spot something on an assessment, or one of our assessors does, what they will do, if they spot something, they'll give them those improvement actions like they would on a brand new applicant, and say, look, you need to up your game, blah, 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 have an honest conversation with them, work with them to improve that. And generally, most people will do that. If you get someone that's going completely rogue, you know, that they're brought to light in those weekly in a meeting, because I've been in those meetings, and you know, there are instances where people, you know, so people accuse us of, oh, they'll never get rid of one, and there are instances where people can and have been rejected from the scheme, because we don't, that's our brand, that's our name. So if a customer spots that, you know, and then suddenly we have to investigate that complaint, and it is one of our installers that's with us, we take that very, very seriously. One, because of the safety aspect, and one, because as a brand, that's calling us out as well. So there is a process that probably people aren't aware of as well that happens, that those things are discussed. And it's very rare that you get people, you know, I think of my days as an installer, did we do everything right? You know, I'd never compromise safety, don't get me wrong, but sometimes having a bad day, you might just do something a little bit slapdash and your workmanship wasn't quite there. That'll do kind of attitude. You know, those things, you know, we sort of don't ignore, but we have conversations with them. But if it's something that's seriously safety issue, no, that's not stood by any of the assessment team.
Yeah. There's bad days, and then there's pure incompetence.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that comes down to something you mentioned earlier, Sam, which is training. So whenever I do a talk, or whenever I do something like a Will Tomorrow, I always say, how many of you are Sparkies? How many think you are getting into the renewables game? A few hands go up, and it's really weird because it's normally the younger generation that want to do it, and some of the older boys, shall we say, without being ageist, are going, no, I'll just see out my time now with sockets and lights on fine. But that's good to see. But then I always say to them, I'll back that up with, well, make sure you get regulated proper training, and make sure you're getting into the legislation before you even strike a blow on putting a panel on a roof or an inverter on a wall. Because what we're seeing is the industry is going, oh, I've seen that on YouTube, that looks a piece of cake. You bolt it to a wall, it's an all-in-one, and I'm going to make a fortune. Well, that scares me to death, as I'm sure it probably does you. So I want people to understand the codes of practice, our publication, you know, as another plug. But actually, I want people to get that proper track, because I'm from a training background, I know the value in that, because they'll teach you things and go, oh, I didn't actually know that. Because we're always learning. In such a fast-moving industry, we're always learning.
Oh, it's very fast,
There's so many education points, I think, that NAPIT and other parts of industry can help with. I mean, we had a chat before this about island murder, I think, and those kind of things as well, where we're looking at how we actually apply that in the real world to meet the intent of the wiring regulations, taking into account what manufacturers are telling us. You know, it's really difficult, isn't it? So that's obviously a space that you can look to help with, Steve, with some of the content you're working on.
Yeah, I think, you know, from a technical point of view, you know, like I say, we're always going to have this, I think we're never going to get over it, because the industry is moving so fast and it's manufacturer driven, right? There's no getting away from that, because they can produce something. You think about EV charging back in the day. Rolex were the only players in the game, and you had to fit an earth electrode. Then there was the unicorn devices, and suddenly they existed and they were real, and now we've got pen fault protection. So, and now, I mean, we were talking earlier in the week about a charger. Oh, I've never heard of those before. So you think of that with inverters for a global market. They'll tell you they do weird and wonderful, and this isn't manufacturer bashing, this is just reality. You know, I remember going to my first Solar and Storage Live, where I first met you, Sam. And one of my tasks was to go around and see, as a training organisation, as I was working for then, what inverter manufacturers we could link up with. I come back with about two, because the one, they had salespeople there. Two, they didn't know how the things worked, you know, and they were made for a global market with things like IT systems in them. So, you know, things like capacitors in them, that when they went into island mode, they would give you a floating voltage, which is dangerous. You know, it's not really permitted in the UK, especially in the domestic market. I used to work on IT systems back in the day when I was an industrial spark for hospitals, IT centres, because they couldn't have that earthing arrangement in there. You know, they had to have those, but that's got strict monitoring involved in it. That's not the same, really. You can't just bolt an inverter to the wall, and have, to me, it doesn't make sense to have no reference point to earth. So I think we do need to do more in that space, and maybe hopefully with the publications and the stuff we're putting out and the talks we do at the shows, I'm explaining to it. I mean, the biggest one for me is, I've had this all the time, is when you look at the code of practice and it goes from connected mode to island mode in a TNCS, and I go, and then it goes through the island mode isolator, neutral earth bond relay, you've got your additional earth electrode, and it's TNS. And someone always goes, no, it's not, it's still a PME, or it's a TT. And because we see an earth electrode, we think TT in our minds.
Yeah, for sure.
And the earthing thing really is, again, it's causing a lot of confusion, because we're telling people almost to, right, yeah, you've got to put an additional earth electrode in. Then we've got problems with separation from underground and neighbouring things. So you're like, hold on, you're telling me one thing, but I've got to do another. So I can see that from an installer's and a designer's point of view, that, yeah, the code of practice and other documents are telling me to do that. But in reality,
how do I comply?
Exactly.
Just for people that are maybe getting into renewables and what have you. So the IT side of things is an isolating transformer. So and I've got caught out with this. A certain battery manufacturer that we install.
Shall remain nameless.
Absolutely, for legal reasons. All corrected now, of course. But when the battery system went into island mode or off-grid mode or protection mode, lots of different ways of saying it, where it's still delivering power to the property during a grid outage, then this specific manufacturer and others out there basically went into an isolating transformer mode, where you end up with a floating voltage. So it still provided voltage to the property, but it didn't have a reference to earth.
No.
And what the regulations say, it's not. I believe it says not recommended. So it doesn't strictly say cannot do it, but it's kind of assumed that you just should not do it. Why they don't say just don't do it? But that's, I suppose, a design thing.
But in other parts of the world, and in other parts of Europe, for instance, I think Norway has got a model where that is absolutely fine. So in a way, to defend the manufacturers in a way, they're making for a global market, and we've got these tricky kind of UK regulations and weird and wonderful earthing systems that suddenly, and it's news to them. But as we said earlier, that we need to get that gap together and get them together.
Your effect on this is maybe understated. There have been some changes in manufacturers' instructions around just this. Let's give energy as an example, where installers of give energy, they did used to say isolated transformer.
You're braver than me. I've not named mine.
I don't mind. We spend enough money with them every month for it not to be a problem, I would think. But now they've changed their manual to say it's TNS. I think a lot of that is led from the bodies of industry having that conversation, because over renewables and Powersonic ringing up complaining about stuff, they just buy you off to a point. It's like, well, what do they know? But when manufacturers are hearing the IET, NAPIT and IC are saying these things, all of a sudden they're forced to listen and think about it. Because I think there's a lack of knowledge in those places around the wiring regulations and how that matches up with product standards. That demarcation between a product standard and a wiring standard is ever closer and more blurry. And I think your involvement in those discussions, it's been listening to at manufacturers level. I've seen the changes in the instruction manual.
It's good that they're listening. Not all are listening. We've still got a lot of work to do, and I know people like Graham Kenyon at the IET and others involved are trying to get into that space, trying to get these working groups together, sort of outside of our normal day jobs, really, I suppose, to try and, or what we're paid to do is just because we want that safety aspect brought into the UK. Because, if you think of something like, the RC62 and some of these past documents and Amendment 3, especially with, I think with Amendment 3 draft for public comments and the past document, those were very proactive approaches by industry in a way. And we still get called out for it by going, oh, we didn't see this coming. And I get that. Like I say, I think with my installers head on. But actually, we didn't wait for something to go wrong with PAS 63-100. We didn't wait for a fire or something to drop out a loft. The stats aren't quite there yet. They are in other countries. But actually, for the organisation to do that and get that written, I know it's caused some issues. Let's not shy away from that, of where we can install batteries now. And it's getting us thinking outside the box a little bit. But actually, the premise of it was correct because it was proactive. So sometimes you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. If they'd
exactly
waited,
what we've said.
If we'd waited and something had happened, why didn't you do it? So actually producing a document, we could argue till we're blue in the face whether it's gone too far. And I've seen some stuff from manufacturers which their rhetoric worries me a little bit. Saying, you can almost ignore it because it's only this. You can't really ignore it, can you? Let's be honest. We've got to take these things in context, and as designers of installations, any installation, especially renewables, we've got to have a sensible approach to it.
So we're going to interject this episode right here. Steve was good enough to sit down with us for coming up to an hour and 40 minutes, and we wanted to break this down into a couple of episodes. So we're going to leave that there just as we've touched on the PAS document. If you've enjoyed this episode, please, as always, drop your comments in alongside this video. If you've got any questions that you want us to ask people like Steve and other parts of industry, please do also let us know. We're wanting to take the audience with us into some of these discussions, and we very much want you all to join in asking the things that you want to know. If you've not already, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down, and get involved in the conversation across social media. We'll be back with part 2 of this, where we delve into the PAS document and various other topics through our industry. So keep your eyes peeled. That should be out next week.